It's Sid Smith looking down the barrel of his camera at me. It's episode 17 of Idiot Wind as we bluster our way through Dylan Vinyl, the definitive collection. There's Sid, a rather charming shot of him holding that LP cover up there. That's the back of the cover, as you can probably guess by his motions. And this week we're discussing a very famous LP indeed. It's Bob Dylan's Desire, released in 1976, recorded in 1975. This one's got an inner sleeve. Not a lot of them have inner sleeves in so far, do they? This is a new thing. And now modelling the wonderfully informative magazine with its host of unseen photos. That's the photo Sid's just showed you from the inner sleeve. And inside, you can see it again. You can see it again, readers, on this amazing spread. What a good use of the space. And I'll put that down now because that's rubbish, isn't it? And we'll talk about this LP. Bob had a very busy 1975. He'd released in January Blood on the Tracks. A few months later, he released the Basement Tapes double album. So he was in everyone's minds. And in May to July of 75, he started writing a new album. And this was going to be a bit different. He was based in New York. He spent 6 weeks in the south of France writing. But the writing didn't initially go particularly well, though he got 4 songs that are on this album from those sessions. Things sort of picked up a bit when he met Jacques Levy, who was a well-known theatrical director and writer. And you may think it's unusual for Bob to co-write. At this stage, it is. And as Bob's mainly known for his words, you may well logically assume, well, he might find someone who could help him write the music to go with his words. But this is Bob Dylan we're talking about, and he chooses to collaborate with another lyricist. So what we've got here is both of them writing the words and Bob writing the music on his own. And bizarrely, this is what he does later on with other collaborators as well. He doesn't seek out musical collaborators that often. It's usually lyrical collaborators. And this leads to a problem with Desire, who wrote what bit, of course. There's one song totally by Bob. And many of these songs were at least started by Bob without Jacques Levy. So Jacques Levy may well have made a few alterations to some of the words, but the speculation is probably mainly Bob on all these things. These sessions were completely different to the Blood on the Track sessions. There was a huge number of musicians. At one stage, members of the British band Kokomo ended up mixed up in the sessions. So according to this, and this is, again, very, very obscure. People don't know who's on one track. According to this magazine, the track Romance in Durango on side 2 of this album features several British musicians. Tony O'Malley, the keyboard player from Kokomo, is supposed to be on that one. He later joined 10cc. Alan Spenner is supposed to be on bass. Jody Linscott, who percussionist, later played with The Who and Pete Townsend. And it says here, Eric Clapton and Neil Hubbard are among the 4 guitarists on that track. I don't know if that's true or not. I don't think anyone knows. These sessions were chaotic. There were so many musicians wandering in and out. Another British musician, Mel Collins, was in the studio for part of these sessions. Very well-known saxophonist. And I don't think Mel Collins plays a note on Desire. I don't think he's on. I've listened. I can't hear any saxophone on that track, particularly. So whether Eric Clapton's on there, whether Tony O'Malley's on there, whether Neil Hubbard's on there, is anyone's guess. The bassist of the band is a brilliant rhythm section, Howie Wyeth on drums, and the estimable Rob Stoner on bass, who after these recording sessions became musical director for the Rolling Thunder Review, the very famous tour that started very early in that year before Desire even came out. Desire came out early in 1976. The Rolling Thunder tour began in October 1975. So Bob was playing some of these unfamiliar songs to audiences who hadn't heard them, because they hadn't had a chance to buy the record from the very beginning of that tour. We'll talk about that tour in another episode. But Desire became a very well-known album. It followed a classic album and a classic archive album at a time when such things weren't usually released. Bob was in the headlines again in good reviews. So Desire became, it's a very famous album. Bob Dylan's Desire is a very famous album. What do you think of this album, Sid?
I remember when Desire came out, and
How old are you then?
Old enough to know better. And I remember I lived in a shared house, and you know, there were several people in the house,
mum and dad,
and they were one of them was a big Dylan fan, and I remember the excitement that attended the arrival of this album. According to Wikipedia, it was released in January. Now, I don't know what the UK...
That sounds right to me. That will be exactly a year since Blood on the Tracks. So.
Right. My memory is of hearing this in a sort of spring, summer kind of time of year. That might just simply be because that's when the guy who liked Dylan, that's when he got round to buying it, of course, you know.
Yeah.
But it was... so this album arrived, and it was on all the time. I became very familiar with it very quickly. Other albums that were around at that time, you know, there was, I can't remember now the name of the, if only I'd done some research before turning the camera on. There was a
looked at Wikipedia, that's pretty good.
There was a John Martin LP that came out. I can't think what it would have been now off the top of my head, but anyway, there was a lot of listening going on and a lot of time spent listening to Desire. So unlike, say, Blood on the Tracks, which we discussed previously, which I'd not heard before, and I'd only played it once, I somehow missed out on Blood on the Tracks completely. But this album was absolutely in the sort of run of the house, and it was heard being played at all hours. And I have to say, it's an album. For me, it's one of the most musical of Dylan's albums. I think that there is a real. Often I criticize, Dylan albums for being a bit too musically static and not really kind of ever developing anything. Whereas I think with Desire, it feels there's a sense of pace and a sense of the music opening out a lot of the times. I think that can obviously be ascribed to the presence of the Scarlet Riviera, I think, who, in a sense, annotates a lot of the songs with a very fluid and fluent playing, kind of a call and response almost to Dylan's vocals, and there's, in the right context, I think that adds a bit of, it animates the music a bit, which for me is a plus, because often my criticism of Dylan is it's just this unmoving block of dirge, but with most of the songs, in fact several of the songs on Desire, there is this blooming musicality to the tracks, which not only it engages me from a musical point of view. I feel like I feel like my attention is held for the most part, although there are one or two notable exceptions to that. But I feel like I'm kind of engaged when I play the album. And it was nice kind of revisiting this album. I had not heard Desire for a very long time. So this was great playing this album, you know, sticking the first track on, Hurricane, and going all the way through. It felt on the one hand, there was obviously a degree of familiarity to it, and the accompanying kind of, oh yeah, I remember then, you know. So you get all of that. But the most abiding thing that came through was just there was a real sense of movement within the album from track to track, which really appealed to me and really works for me. There are some gorgeous, there are some really nice moments within some of the pieces. Now, unlike you, I'm not really listening to it from a lyrical point of view. I didn't know anything about Dylan collaborating with a lyricist, and I find that actually quite interesting. I'm assuming, I know it's probably heresy to say it, but I'm assuming Dylan's collaborating with a lyricist because he's struggling to come up with stuff that works. But be that as it may, and that's not a criticism. I mean, that's just sometimes the practicalities of releasing however many albums in to his career this album is, you know. So overall, it's an album I respond to quite well, and there are moments on it that I really like a lot, and there's not actually a whole lot that I don't like. Say, like, compared to, say, Blood on the Tracks or some of the other ones, where, you know, I just sort of wanted to pull my own head off. But there are, I mean, I don't know how we're going to do this, if we're going to get into the individuality of the tracks, although I don't think we would have time to do that. But there are lots of moments. There's a gorgeous moment where I mean, I've just looked at a note I made for myself. The note says mention Emmylou Harris.
Brilliant. I wonder when you're going to mention her.
And there's a song on there which I mean, I think Emmylou Harris's work on it really, I mean, she kind of adds so much. She carries a lot of the melodies, and there's some great harmony work she does, which actually really sets Bob off in quite a good light. You know, there's some very good use of like, well, you take this line and I'll do this line. It really works together. It dovetails very nicely. And there's some lovely instrumentation on, for example, Joey. I think it's called Joey, where I don't know who's playing the accordion, but there's a moment where Dylan mentions the accordion, and then this accordion line comes in, and it's sparkling and it's bright and it's fun, and it adds so much to the track. Similarly, there's not many Dylan albums I can say this about. There's a certain plushness, even a lusciousness to the overall orchestration of the album. On Joey particularly, there's some gorgeously effective arrangements within it, all of which is good news for me, because unlike you, I don't give a fuck what he's singing about. I'm barely listening to that. I'm only catching the heavily repetitive choruses, verses and choruses. But there's so much going on in the material that it keeps me going. It feeds me enough information, which, and often Dylan albums don't do that for me. So I'm pretty, as much as I can say, you know, I like a Dylan album. This is, for me, one of the albums that I would definitely not be taking to the shop when I take most of these to sell at a secondhand record shop. Can I just mention a couple of tracks which kind of?
Oh yeah, of course, yeah.
Not necessarily for good reasons. I laughed. I mean, as I say, it was a long time since I've played the album, and so when I was playing it for this one, there's a track called "Oh Sister," and I actually did a little laugh out loud where it's because it's for all. It sounds like they've started off playing "The Weight" by the band. I mean, that's just it's almost note for note, and it sounds like they're doing their cover version of it, and it sort of made me laugh. And it sort of skirts around almost being "The Weight," except without the fab chorus. And the the song that made me go, huh? Was Mozambique. And is Bob doing it in that first verse? Is Bob doing a sort of cod, sort of kind of black accent? Is he? It sounds like he is to me, which you know, that's fine. But the song itself, it reminds me of a sort of a song. It could be off a minor Graham Nash album. You know, it's sort of like, it has that sort of, oh, let's go to Mozambique. You know, now I have no idea whether or not he went to Mozambique or what the inspiration for it was. I dare say you know all that. The thing about Joey as well, going back to that song, I do like that song, but of course,
I hate Joey.
But of course, it's 8 minutes too long.
It's ridiculously long. This album is long. This album is just 5 minutes shorter than the Rolling Stones.
It needs to have stopped after 3 minutes, for God's sake. And that's probably true of one or two of the other longish songs on this album. So overall, thumbs up, but you know, with
thumbs up, but yeah.
With a few reservations.
This is a very long album. Side 2 is 28 minutes long. This entire album is just 5 minutes shorter than the Rolling Stones' Exile on Main Street, which is, of course, a double album. So you can tell how long it is. I think this is a half great album. And I don't think it compares to Blood on the Tracks at all. I think Blood on the Tracks dwarfs this album. The main problem with it, for me, is renewed interest in social commentary. We mentioned before, like the Lonesome Death of Hattie Carroll. He can write these very effective, enraging songs, but when he takes a specific case, i.e. not when he's not writing The Times They Are A-Changing or Blowing in the Wind, which are more general songs, when he takes a specific case, he so often gets the facts of the case round his neck that I find it really irritating. And Hurricane is one of those songs for me. It starts off with Hurricane, which musically, this is playing into your hands, is fine. It's got a nice driving rhythm. It's impassioned, but he was actually sued for libel over that song. And an early version, they played, when he first recorded it, they were going to play it on a CBS TV special, and the lawyers refused to let him sing it unless he changed the words. And he did change the words, and he re-recorded Hurricane, and he was still sued for libel by one of the witnesses in the case. And that's because, despite the claims of this song, I think Hurricane Carter was a very dodgy character indeed. And for example, there's a whole verse in this about if you're black in the area Hurricane Carter lives, you haven't got a chance. There's no point going out on the street. Hurricane Carter was driving his car, I think around New Jersey that night, where the 3 murders happened. And the witness who lived in the flat above the bar looked out of the window when she heard the gunshots and saw this, you know, very, very distinctive car with certain lights on the back. And that car was stopped later on, or the car matching its description was stopped. And the copper who stopped it let the car go because Hurricane Carter, the famous local boxer, was driving it. Oh, Hurricane, it's you. That doesn't quite match with the, the police are out to get him from day one. And there's all kinds of things about him. When the Rolling Thunder tour started, principally, I think, to get Hurricane Carter out. And it, eventually it succeeded. Though there was a first retrial when he was again found guilty of all the charges. And when he was eventually released, it was on technicalities. But on that tour, Joni Mitchell spoke to him on the phone and met him and thought he was he was, thought he was a bullshitter, thought he was a bad guy, and he was taking everybody for a ride. So I think Bob has read Hurricane's book, and he's met him in prison, and he goes on this lengthy song full of factual inaccuracies. It irritates me. And what also irritates me is Joey, sorry. He sounds like a saint in that song, this gangster. He's not a saint. This is a bloke who participated in a homosexual gang rape in prison and had people taken out. And I just find the whole lengthy dirge in why write a song that length praising him? And it's this thing. I think Dylan had been under great pressure for years to start writing socially conscious songs again, and he should have ignored that pressure. In 1974, he wrote a song that's not on any of his albums, was only released as a single, called George Jackson. And that was released in an acoustic version, acoustic key, and a big band version. And you can't, it's difficult to find. It's on, one of those versions is on, I think the acoustic version is on the Greatest Hits Volume 3. The big band version is only officially released on this thing only an absolute idiot would buy. It's an Australian 3 CD compilation, which was called Masterpieces. And the big band version is on disc 2 of this. And that's a song about a Black Panther. Again, Dylan had read a book written from the Black Panther's point of view. And that song, George Jackson, which is a similar thing to Hurricane, really, lyrically, Jacques Levy was worried they'd end up writing a song like George Jackson, because this guy he's an emissary of love in the song, and the prison guards are evil and they shoot him down in prison. And what the song omits to mention is he killed about 3 people trying to escape from prison, including a prison guard, and was trying to get everyone else to rise up and burn the prison to the ground. I don't think, you can say, oh, perhaps they should have used non-lethal force, but I don't think it's surprising after seeing him kill prison officers that they shot him. And I don't think it's a case of him being an emissary of love or anything either. I think that song is bollocks. And I think Hurricane is bollocks, and I think Joey is bollocks. And when you consider that, that's quite a lot of the album's playing time, and irritates me. Now, straight after Hurricane, there's a masterpiece. Isis is a masterpiece of a song, and the version is very good on Desire. When they played that song live on the Rolling Thunder review, that song became epic. One of the most theatrical performances Dylan has ever done. Very dramatic, very, really was. That show incorporated masks and makeup and all kinds of things. It was very different from any tour he's done before or since. Isis was a really incredibly exciting highlight of every show. Must have been very exciting for audiences who didn't even know what the bloody song was for the first 2 or 3 months of the tour. But that's Bob. And I just think Isis he always introduced it as, this is a song about marriage. And the whole song is like, it's like the Treasure of the Sierra Madre, John Huston film, where they all go looking for this non-existent thing, and the journey becomes the point. This is a guy who's left Isis, the woman he loves, and he goes on a weird journey to some pyramids embedded in ice, and they end up basically embarking in grave robbery, and the bloke who's persuaded him to come on this madcap mission dies, and he leaves him in the empty casket they find in the middle of a pyramid. And it's basically that. He learns other things than what he's actually going for, and is reunited with Isis at the end. And it's another marriage song, but he plays piano on that one. It's very dramatic song. I think it's brilliant. I also love One More Cup of Coffee. Before I go, I think it's a great song. Been recorded by everybody from Tom Jones to Robert Plant. What a range of artists that is. And it's got this kind of Middle Eastern thing about the melody, and it's like this kind of really unusual for Bob, what he's tried to do with that verse. He's deliberately tried to be influenced by Middle Eastern kind of music, with that cadence at the beginning of every verse. And on that song, I Know Sister, Emmylou Harris is excellent.
Mm.
And then there's the closing song, Sarah, the only song, we're going to guess who that's about, the only song written by Bob on his own. He sang that while she was in the control room, and he just recorded it when she came into the studio. It's a lovely song. It's got one unfortunate lyric. He's looking for a word to rhyme with help, and he says the beach was deserted except for some kelp. And I always think that's a fucking terrible line. And, I always imagine he's writing that song, and then she comes in and he goes, "Oh, I'll just say kelp. I'll just sing it while she's here. It'll be dead dramatic." and he's done that a couple of times to Sarah. "Oh, I'm writing this song about it. Oh, she's just unexpectedly dropped in. I'll sing it now." And he could have cut it. He could have dropped in a different line, I think, because that line is bollocks.
What's the one track out of all of this that you would pick?
ISIS.
Okay, yeah, right. Which sounds like Bob Dylan doing prog, the way you've described it. Although minus a
There's
melody.
nothing proggy about it. It's just pure excitement. It's none of the waffling and noodling around you get with the prog music you like.
The one track I would pick from this is actually One More Cup of Coffee, and I don't normally say this kind of thing, but I do think there's a very good vocal from Dylan on that track. I do think he actually
he's trying to do something different, and he's putting a lot of effort in.
He's actually holding a melody and working it through with his voice, as opposed to his usual, frankly, tardy way of singing. So overall, it's a bit of a mixed bag for you with the tracks you've mentioned as
its highs are very high.
But I don't know about either of the cases you mentioned. If Joey was 3 minutes long, I would think that's a great little song. If Hurricane, and I don't mind Hurricane, but boy oh boy, does it go on too long. But overall, I quite like the album, and it's an album that out of all of them I would keep. In the short time we have left, where do we go next on the Bob journey?
Well, the next album is a live album, and that's called Hard Rain.
Okay.